let's move on to our next conversation. The next conversation is around school lunches. I have some clips to show you that maybe we don't need to show you because actually 3 News did quite a good job on covering it. But there is a clip on Stuff where Seymour is being told by the Education Minister to come meet. There is, of course, this Marmite sandwich quote that you've heard, but I actually think 3 News has done quite a good job sort of, I think their report's better than 1 News as well, sort of covering the whole thing. This conversation comes up in a couple of parts because there's a pre-recorded conversation that I have with Jan Tinetti as well, which we'll get to after this. Let's have a look at the conversation today around school lunches. One of the reasons I think this is better than 1 News's report is that they get a little bit more information out of Erica Stanford and David Seymour for him going, nah, couldn't make it, which is the ultimate slap in the face. And it makes us all question again Luxon's leadership. So if Luxon's got a minister who a leader of one of his coalition partners basically just flips the bird at, then what? We've always said the reason he seems to treat his ministers differently from, for example, ministers under ACT and under New Zealand First is because he doesn't have the ability to rein anyone in. So now the leader of one of those other parties, fascinating to see with what absolute disdain he treats Erica Stanford. Let's have a look.
On the government to urgently fix the free school lunches program after children received meals full of melted plastic. Christopher Luxon is expressing confidence that his associate education...
He said to Luxon this morning, sorry, to Hoskins this morning, and I play the Hosking conversation to Jan Tetti. He says, we're getting complaints every day, and he doesn't click to the point that means because there's issues every day. He's basically going, there's a complaint every day because there's a whinger every day. It's like, no, there's a complaint every day because there are issues with your system every day. That comes up in the next conversation.
Minister David Seymour can fix it. And if parents don't like it, the Prime Minister's solution, pack a Marmite sandwich.
Let them eat Marmite. Let them eat Marmite.
Senior political correspondent Jenna Lynch.
This is an inedible lunch.
Okay, just pausing that to have a look at. So you can see the black staining is the melting. So the plastic has melted into the food for the school lunches. And remember where we've gone from. We've gone from a lot of local volunteer groups, mums of the kids making lunches, to this. Melted plastic into the lunches. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to go, mistakes happen, yet this mistake doesn't happen when the mums are making it or when the local community kitchen's making it, because they make them and they walk them down the road and deliver them. This is the one, these are made because they're making 100,000 meals and they have to get them out as quick and as cheaply as possible. And this kind of thing happens. This is anti-quality control.
Intended for children at Murchison Area School, but contaminated with melted plastic from the top.
In a number of cases, that had melted into the top of the meal, into the, I think it was potato, it was all... That was horrible and very unsafe.
And tainted with burnt plastic from the bottom.
When some of the students got to the end of their meals, the black plastic had either melted completely with holes in it and had seeped into the food, or was burnt enough that it had seeped into the food as well.
Andy Ashworth raised the alarm. He hadn't heard back about the result of any investigation by the time we spoke to him today.
Pretty inadequate, to be honest.
But the company had the chance to brief the minister.
They overheated the oven. They set the wrong temperature. That led to the burning. There then was insufficient quality control to stop it being sent out.
It's really surprising that kind of thing happens with an organisation that will give out as little as possible to make as much profit as possible, that they don't have the staff to keep an eye on quality control. It's really surprising. It's just really surprising how that would happen in a big group like Compass, Because normally they're sending their meals off to prisoners and they probably don't have the same complaints because what else are the prisoners going to do? Yet in this situation, as they clip that $3 meal to be probably a $1 meal with $2 profits, they just don't have the money left over for quality control. Oh, no big deal. Just plastic in your kid's lunch, that's all.
All of that has been investigated and clear instructions have been put in place to prevent it from happening again.
The plastic-riddled lunches are just the latest trouble in the problem-riddled school lunch program.
In
Well,
both
how many
those
people
cases.
had to have eyes on it for it to make it all the way to the school children with burnt plastic?
Well, you've got to bear in mind, there's 143,000 of these meals going out every day.
Well, hang on. Hang on. You can't say you got to bear in mind 143,000 of these, because what you're saying is, well, we can't handle the volume. You guys have made this decision. So we don't have to bear in mind 143,000 because you changed the system. Remember? Better quality, cheaper. So you don't get to say bear in mind 143,000 lunches because you are the guys who set this up to be better quality and cheaper. So we will not bear in mind 143,000 meals, because if you hadn't have changed it, it would have been 80 meals from the kitchen at the intermediate school, making it for their own kids. So no, you don't get as a defence now, well, there's so many meals, Chewie. We can't keep control of all of them. That's the bag you've given yourself. Chewie?
I think the other question that goes with this is what's an acceptable amount of children eating burnt plastic? Because there must be a yardstick.
I guess so.
Right? Like what's the KPI on this?
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly blasé. Incredibly blasé. People wouldn't go to a restaurant that sometimes serves you burnt plastic. They just wouldn't. It's not acceptable under any sort of framework that there's an acceptable number of burnt meals or an acceptable number of times that, like, he was singing the praises of getting butter chicken 11 times in a row. As that was like, there's lots of people that would love 11 butter chickens. Fuck off. Like, he's not a serious person, and he's taking this role of like, oh, it's such a tiny amount, or they're doing so many meals, but you're right to point out the things that he told us at the start of this was that it was going to be better for the taxpayer, there was going to be less wastage, they were going to be better meals than what they've got, and they were going to be expanded to more people. How many of those things has he failed us on?
And can we just say right now, this is the perfect time to remind Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, who in the last conversation was talking about calling the patients customers, and that's okay because what you have to deliver. Well, if it's good for the goose, then how about these children who are your customers? What do you think of your customers getting the product which is food with burnt plastic in it? Mr. Roll-on deodorant salesman, Mr. Captain Daddy Business, what do you do for your customer who is getting lunches with melted plastic in them? Because I guess the one difference between customers and clients is clients tend to only have one option. Customers don't. So if you're going to call them customers, you should probably give them another fucking option as well. Just a thought. We'll keep going on this.
Seymour promised he could do school lunches cheaper, but the result has been subpar.
It's as simple as we've had a series of challenges. People said we couldn't deliver on time.
They seem that they were right about the things you promised.
We're now delivering on time 100% of the time. There's some complaints about some of the quality of the food. We're working to overcome that.
And the Prime Minister knows it.
Well, he's well aware of the issues and the challenges that we're seeing in some cases, but I've got every confidence he'll fix it.
See, the question, unfortunately, that no reporter then asked Chewie is, I've got every confidence that he'll fix it. What evidence do you have to give you that confidence, Mr. Prime Minister? Cite your metric that you're using to measure your opinion that gives you that confidence. What is it? Because none of us can see it. We're going to get to the bit with Erica Stanford now and the middle finger that David Seymour gave her today.
But I've got every confidence he'll fix it.
Confidence the Education Minister would not express when asked.
Well, that's why I'm meeting with him today, to find out what the plan is moving forward to make sure that the right child is receiving the right meal at the right time.
Erica Stanford and David Seymour were supposed to meet today.
I've asked David Seymour for a meeting this morning to go through some of the issues on the school lunch program to make sure that they are being cleared up.
But Seymour never showed. His meeting with ACT MPs ran overtime.
We have regular scheduled meetings. I think this one was scheduled 2 weeks ago and we'll now reschedule it. So we'll get there.
I was in my office just after 11:30. You were there and he didn't show us. As I say, ministers' diaries change all of the time.
I mean, I've briefed the Prime Minister.
So you don't need to talk to the Education Minister?
Well, I will get to her.
That felt like a slap in the face to Murchison Area School.
Not listened to, and it really does make myself personally and our school community question the commitment from Mr Seymour to this scheme.
David Seymour's just doing his own thing. Christopher Luxon won't do anything about it. Erica Stanford's appearing to look tough and is basically being ignored by David Seymour. And actually the people who are suffering are the kids who are being served substandard meals, if in fact they get served a meal.
That's a really fair point from Chippy. There's one victim in this whole thing, it's the kids. Right, they're the ones missing out. I mean, you could reference the conversation around nursing. The people who are most impacted by are the patients or the customers, as Mr. Luxon likes to call them. Same here. It's the kids, it's the customers.
David Seymour has promised to get things turned around by the end of next month. 5 more weeks of children not knowing what's going to show up to eat.
Will you hand over the food in schools program to someone else if you can't fix it by term 2?
Look, if someone else was willing to take it, but frankly, this is a big challenge and I'm enjoying it.
And if parents don't like it, the PM's advice:
Of course, if you don't like the food, ultimately, you can make a Marmite sandwich and put an apple in a lunch bag.
have a sandwich.
Jenna is with us now. Kia ora, Jenna.
I think we'll leave, Jenna. Thank you for your report, though. That was a great report. Right, Chewie's obviously having computer issues tonight, but that's okay because we've got a pre-recorded conversation coming up right now. I want to get to this conversation tonight because we like on BHN finding new angles and asking new questions. Lucky enough to have Jan Tetti with us this afternoon, with me this afternoon. And there's a really important question in this conversation. And it's to do with the children and the rights they have to receive the food. And no one else has talked about it yet. And I think it could be something that goes a bit further should this angle be taken. So, hey man, we're going to play this conversation now with Jan, and then we'll come back and get your guys' response to it, and Chewie, I'll get your response to it because you haven't seen it yet either. And also, I guess then we're going to be talking about Nikki No Boats and the ferries to wrap up the show. So let's play the conversation with Jan now. I want to welcome to the show Labour's spokesperson for education, Jan Tinetti. Jan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Lovely. Have you been with us before at all, ever? Is this the
No,
first time?
I haven't. This is first time.
Highlight. This will be the highlight of your month.
I'm a long-time watcher, so it's really good being here.
You're with us today as the spokesperson for education, as we said. I want to talk to you about school lunches. I've sort of come across a thought today, and I guess I'm in the privileged position that I can expand that thought by asking the people in the houses of power what they think about this. So I'll get to that shortly. But the first thing I want to do is play the comments from the Prime Minister this morning on Michael Hosking on Newstalk ZB, and then have a little bit of a chat about that. And then I've got a couple of questions for you. So let's see what Mr. Luxon said this morning.
School lunches, do we actually have a problem here, or is this a pile on from the unions, the teachers and the media to make David Seymour look bad?
Well, I think the bottom line is some of the lunches aren't up to scratch, but Seymour is all across the issue. I've got every confidence he's.
When you say they're not up to scratch, what do you mean?
Good question.
Well, I mean, you get every day we get a story of a particular lunch. There is.
Yeah, but why do we get a story every day? We get a story every day because someone's a whiner, don't we?
Yeah, maybe
not.
There's some
Is there a
problems with
genuine...
Or we get it every day because there's problems every day, Mr. Hosking, but we'll get back to that shortly.
lunches, But look, here's the deal. I mean, if you don't like the lunches, actually just go make a Marmite sandwich and put an apple in the bag. And as a parent, I think parents should take responsibility for feeding their own kids. I'd rather the state didn't have to do so. It should be a parental responsibility. But the fact is that kids are actually coming to school with no lunch. I'm not willing to let them go hungry.
Yeah, but this is what I don't get. So you're hearing from teachers going that hungry kids can't learn, correct? Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
And when we do something about it, we still whine some more that the cellophane couldn't get done and I'm hiring too many people to distribute them. And the only sympathy I've ever had is they're late. They should be on time. I get that. Beyond that, you're just bitching. You're moaning.
Yeah.
If you don't want it, don't have it. So, I mean, at what point...
if you don't like it, make a sandwich.
Right, exactly. So at what point does the government go, if you're just going to complain about this, we'll save the money, thanks very much? Or is there an actual problem that Seymour needs to address?
No, there are some lunches that are not up to scratch and some delivery that's not up to scratch. And David and I have talked about it, and he's all over the detail. I have got every confidence he's going to get it sorted. And so he's right to actually keep chasing those issues down and making sure we're getting what we've contracted and the quality of the product, as well as obviously the on-time delivery of it. So that's a reality. But I just say to you, there's always going to be people that are unhappy with school lunches, and I get that. And if you really are unhappy with it, for God's sake, go make a Marmite sandwich and put an apple in a bag, just like you and I had.
Peter, so some pretty massive neoliberal sort of Tory, austerity, kind of these terrible welfare queens. They can just make a Marmite sandwich vibes out of that conversation. But how about before we get to some of these questions I've got, what are your thoughts on what the PM said this morning?
I think when I first heard it, I was pretty disgusted. If I'm going to be really, really honest about this, I'm trying not to show my anger, but I guess I can't help that. I am really, really angry. It's almost like you've got somebody there who is the modern day Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake is basically the modern day, without really knowing and understanding the backgrounds that these young people come from. The fact that it's really hard for them to get food. I don't want to get into the weeds of that, but it's out of their playbook. It's out of their playbook. 30 years ago, just about to the day, Jim Bolger said exactly the same thing to Helen Clark in the House. And we're still having this argument. It's just ridiculous. We know that kids learn best when they're fed well. We know that when their nutrition is great, they're in their optimum space for learning. So why aren't we doing something about it? Well, we did. Our government put in the lunch program. I'm really proud of the work that happened there. But I'm absolutely devastated to see the heart and soul being ripped out of it and just being discarded and then being said, oh, it's up to parents anyway. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, I feel your frustration. What we often do here, Jan, is we say for the government, we will hold them to the standard they held you guys to, which I think is fair, or we will hold them to the standards they set for themselves. And when it comes to school lunches, this was the day it was released. These are the standards they set for. No, we had nothing to do with this. Like, we didn't force these pictures on you guys. This is the standard they had for themselves. There's some butter chicken and some rice, and it looks, looks fine. And there's more of them there. And then there's going to be a lovely picture there of some kind of muesli slice, yum. And of course, we've got fruit and we've got yogurt. And of course, all I need to do is Google school lunches NZ. So that's their standard for themselves. Their standard for themselves. Nothing more, nothing less. And this is what they're delivering.
Yeah.
And this is what they're delivering. And this is what they're delivering. So I think it's completely appropriate that we hold them to the standard they set for themselves, which is all we're trying to do here today.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this. I want this to be successful. I don't want to see it falling over. I know the difference it makes for young people. Look, if he could do it and do it well, I'd be the first one to say, good on you. Let's do bipartisan agreement around this, but it's not. And I know, as someone who oversaw that as the former minister, that it was going right to the stretch as it was. to cut that heart and soul out of it. I knew it was going to be really, really difficult, and it's just proving that way. But what frustrates me is he will not take responsibility for it. He will not say, yeah, we're getting it wrong, we need to go back and rethink. It's always, the previous government didn't fund it. The previous government, a whole lot of rubbish around it, because he doesn't want it to work. He wants it to fail.
I also think that a little piece of advice for you guys, as arrogant as that sounds coming from a bullfed podcaster, these are not $3 meals, because remember, this is now a private company. So how much profit of that $3 goes into their pocket? So these are $1.50 meals, dollar meals. Yeah. These are $2 meals. They keep and when you had all the kind of groups in the community with mums coming in to help, that was all voluntary work. They were kind of $3 to $4 meals. Now they're dollar meals or $1.50 meals. I think we have to continually remind them of that as well. And it's interesting when you say he won't take responsibility. In that conversation with Mike Hoskins, he said they're not up to scratch. Well, fix them. He said we're getting complaints every day. Well, because we've just shown you the kind of food. I still challenge any reporter that's got access to the Prime Minister to hold some of those pictures in front of him and say, could you please identify this meal? Like, could you just tell us what it is? That's all. Because if the Prime Minister can't tell us what it is, that's probably a sign that it is not, quote, up to scratch. And then I said, as that kind of austere Tory, if they don't like it, they can just make it themselves. It's disgusting. Hey, I want to move very quickly, though, into a part of the conversation that I've heard no one talk about yet. And I'm really intrigued by this. I could be way off base. And that's why nobody's asked these questions, because they're just wrong. I've done a bit of research today on our Human Rights Commission. In and under our Human Rights Commission, there is the right to food. That's a right, as says the Human Rights Commission. Under the right to food, it's got the children and their right to food. It says this: children are especially vulnerable to the lack of adequate food. And by the way, for those listening on the audio podcast, this is the New Zealand Human Rights Commission. Because if you look at international ones, it talks sometimes about issues that you'd more see in a third world country. But this is the New Zealand Human Rights Commission. Children are especially vulnerable to lack of adequate food, as they need nutritious and safe food to grow. If children and their families are unable to get adequate food, support should be provided, e.g., through school lunches. Food made available through such support should, and then there's a link going off to meet the dietary needs of children. That goes off to the United Nations Human Rights article. Within there is a sector that talks about the rights of children, and amongst other things it says this: if children and their families are unable to enjoy the right to food by the means at their disposal, support should be provided, for instance through school meal programs or food aid. We go back to the New Zealand Human Rights Commission, and this write-up on children and the right for food says, the Convention on the Rights of the Child protects the children's right to food in the context of the right to life, survival and development, to health, to nutrition, and to an adequate standard of living. So, Jan, my question is it possible that this government are breaching the rights of these children, the human rights of these children, by not delivering on any of those requirements as per the Human Rights Act 1993?
It is absolutely possible, and it is certainly something that needs to be investigated further. The whole reason why the lunch program was started in the first place was because food insecurity was so great going through the COVID times, and government policy can impact upon that, and government policy can make those sorts of areas that are so hard for people better. And that's why the healthy free lunch school program was so important as part of reducing food insecurity. What we're seeing now is we're seeing cost of living really impacting on people, and to minimise the healthy lunch program is a huge part of the growing food insecurity that many of us are seeing out in our communities. So I absolutely believe that there is a fundamental right, as you've pointed out, through the documentation that exists and the acts of Parliament that exist there now, for young people, children, to have food and to have food security. So you are spot on that this needs to be investigated further.
And I guess I know what some of the comeback will be. The comeback will be, well, they are providing food, so they can tick that box. But are they providing food which meets, quote, the dietary needs of children? So if it doesn't tick that box, then they seem to be in breach of these children's human rights. And I guess to test it, someone needs to lay a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. I guess we've got people watching right now, maybe people within Parliament. That would be the way to test this, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. It's not something I've personally thought about up until now, but it's something I can look into. But you've got a whole lot of people that you are now appealing to who I know, because I get emails from the same people telling me about these things. I know that that's something that they will investigate as well.
That is the Labour spokesperson for education, Jan Tinetti. Jan, thanks so much for joining us for the first time tonight. Love to have you back.
Thank you. Love to be back.
Alrighty, Chewie. I told you what we were going to talk about tonight. I gave you a call and laid it out for you. So that's the first time you've seen it. What are your thoughts? Mic's on. Mic's on. Your mic's not on.
Oh, it was on the whole time. I was tricking you. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm really, really interested to see how it will play out.
Yeah.
And I really think that, like, I've seen a lot of comments online today, the usual sort of comments that piss me off whenever we're talking about feeding children. The Prime Minister has kicked it off, with his little look at how relatable comment I am. Maybe they should have a sandwich and an apple like you and I have, Mike Hosking. Do we really believe that Luxon has a little lunchbox with a little sandwich and a piece of fruit in it? Do we really believe that that's how he does this day? Is this another one of these unbelievable statements that the Prime Minister could pull out of his asshole to make him look more relatable? It is just ridiculous. We have a responsibility. There are so many reasons to do this. There are so many studies that show that children that eat properly learn better. Children that learn better end up going on to further education, have less developmental problems, have less interactions with the law, all of that sort of thing. You want to break the cycle of poverty? Here's a really economical way the state can actually do something. And that is just to feed kids at school, like so many developed countries around the world do, as a matter of course. Some of them do it better than others, but they fucking do it. And a lot of them are countries that Luxon loves to compare us to. So I don't see why this is controversial. We've even had people in our chat today going, oh, we need to end school lunches. My mum was able to give me a lunch every day. Guess what? I didn't come from a particularly wealthy family, but I don't think we were on the edge of poverty. But there were days that I didn't go to school with lunch. And when like the whole issue with these meals turning up late, burnt, repetitive, not nutritious, taste yucky, all of these things, right? If you know your school is going to provide or is supposed to provide your child lunch, why would you make them a backup lunch? Why would you do it? So the option that Luxon's talking about is, okay, everybody needs to buy a backup lunch in case this big multinational corporation that we gave the tender to fucks this up somehow that they can eat. Or, alternatively, they're hungry all day. What a shit choice that is.
And look, just remember, and I think what we've discovered through this process is that argument of, well, the parents can just do it. It's acknowledged very clearly. If children and their families are unable to get adequate food, support should be provided easier through school meals. It's ironic that it says school meals. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's the Human Rights Commission. It's the New Zealand situation acknowledging there that not everyone can do that. I'd actually be really interested. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Apples are $5-6 a kilo. I wonder what average number of children at school. I don't know, 2.5. So what's what's a Marmite sandwich and 2 apples actually end up costing every day? I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than $3 per day. So,
Pat,
yeah. Yep.
I make my lunch every day. And it is a sandwich, and it is some yogurt, and it's a piece of fruit, and it's a muesli bar or something. It is more than $3 a day.
Mm.
Like there are so many reasons to do this properly, right? And my concern is that there's going to be so much faffing about with this that the argument is, see, it's all too hard. So there's no point in doing it. There's too much waste. The kids don't like the meals. Everybody's having a whinge. Fuck you.
Well, but hang on.
But
But the thing is,
government-
they can't. They can't not do it. This is the point that I was going to say. They can't not do it. It says very clearly, if the children and their families are unable to get adequate food, support should be provided through school meals, e.g. school meals. So actually, people, and I actually agree with the concept, especially Seymour. And mind you, did you pick up the words from Luxon's? He basically, or he literally said that government shouldn't be having to do this, but we are. So he's already indicating that in an ideal world, government wouldn't be doing this. It's absolutely Seymour's bag. But I'm sorry, the Human Rights Commission says you have to do it. You can't just ignore it. So actually that conversation around, even if they're trying to break it to get rid of it, it's moot because they have to do it. Or they have to pay families more, give the lower people maybe the tax breaks to give them the way to get to that adequate food. Because you have to do it. It's the law.
Yeah, my position is all students should have access to a meal at school. A, because it is good for the country, first and foremost, right at the top of the bill. It is good for our society. It is good for the growth of our young people. It leads to better outcomes for them in their later life. There is an obligation. There's an obligation. And anybody that is saying that it's down to the parents, is that your answer for a hungry child? That if a hungry child came up to you and said, I haven't eaten, you go, well, take it out with your mum. What a heartless person you are.
Mm.
Like, there are so many reasons. But what you're saying, Pat, is absolutely true. But I would expand it even further. All students should have school meals.
Yeah.
The benefit comes at scale. It removes the stigma of you being a poor kid that needs a school meal.
Mm.
It puts everybody, like this government loves to talk about everybody's the same. Well, here's something that you could do. This government loves to say that they're laser focused on the cost of living. Well, here's one way that you can affect that. You can make it easier for families. Like there's no downside to doing this properly. So why are these guys making such a fucking pig's ear of it and telling us that it's gourmet?